Hello and welcome to the new series of IT and cybersecurity. This time we focus on awareness and related issues, and this continues to be a part of our GDPR, GRC, IT and cybersecurity reboot series. We have had multiple topics that we have gone through, and this time we will be talking about IT and cybersecurity issues. Last time we talked about ISO standards, and the time before we talked about structured and unstructured data, and before that it was data subject request, the full Monty. And just for your information, next month on the 14th of October, we will be talking about data storage. In November, we will be talking about data governance and data supply chain. And in December, on the 9th of December, we will be talking about ROPA, Record of Processing Activities, and the CRUDE metrics. And as you probably know, CRUDE stands for Create, Read, Update, and Delete. So CRUDE metrics and ROPA will be the final event for the year on the 9th of December. But anyway, let's talk about the IT and cybersecurity awareness, which is the first part of the presentation that I will do. After that, it will be Christian who will be talking about phishing and cybercrime, the current trends and challenges. And then we have Anand Uvaila, who will be talking about how to recover from a breach, the backups, the recovery, the learnings, and so on. So these are the three topics that we will be discussing today. You are welcome to send your questions in the chat box, and we will respond to them as we go. Also, we have the Q&A session towards the end of the event. So once again, welcome all, and let's talk about the cybersecurity awareness. Every company needs to have a digital footprint, that you almost cannot avoid. And it is that digital footprint that also decides on the cybersecurity issues, the exercises that you need to have, the solutions, the scenarios, the rationale, and a number of other components that decide how your digital footprint is seen by others, seen by all stakeholders. So let us start with the cybersecurity training and awareness. Let us see what is the traditional approach, the old school, and what are the new methods that we can also focus on. But before we go into the details of the traditional approach and our suggested approach, let us first discuss some of the academics that are around the the development of this old school and new approach. We have taken this from the suggestions from two very well-known academics. The first one we want to discuss is the Danish professor Knud Illeris. Knud Illeris has developed a model for adult learning that focuses on cognition, emotion, and society. All three, cognition, emotion, and society, must be present for the learning to occur. Professor Illeris assumed that the cognitive element of his model contains the knowledge and the skills. The emotion element contains feelings and motivation, while the society is about communication with other people and the stakeholders. According to Professor Illeris, one of the 5 types of raw material starts off with the learning process. And the 5 types of material, the raw material is perception, which is awareness, transmission, which is communication, experience, which is understanding and involvement, imitation, which is simulation or replication or repetition, and finally the 5th component of the raw material that is required is activity. And activity could stand for action, quiz, exam, certification, and so on. So this was what Professor Knud Illeris talked about. You need 3 components as a platform: cognition, emotion, and society. And you have to build the platform with 5 other areas, which is perception, transmission, experience, imitation, and activity. And I explained the 5 components. The second person that we focus on in our new approach is a person called Peter Jarvis. Peter Jarvis says that the learning process begins with experience of the 5 human senses. While Illeris was talking about the 5 components of as a raw material, Jarvis says that we need the 5 human senses as well: the touch, the sight, the hearing, the smell, and the taste. Because the body senses plays an eminent role in the learning. So that if you want to learn something, you need to have the mind and the body connection. And only, according to Peter Jarvis, if you have the mind and the body connection, that you are able to grasp new learning material. So this was the old school and the new school component and the academics involved. You will get the presentation after we are finished. So therefore, I will go quickly through some of the areas that are important. So we always talk about policies, procedures, the do's and the don'ts, because discipline is important. However, after you have established the disciplinary component in the organization so that everybody follows and understands the policies, they know the procedures, they know what to do and not to do, then you have to encourage employees to practice and to think in the right way and choose the correct option, and also ensure that their behavior is in order whenever they are in doubt. And when they are in doubt is often due to any risk that are involved. The other component is that you need to have an annual calendar. Most organizations have a calendar, an annual calendar, where they decide how their training and learning will be based. However, besides the annual calendar, so that you can satisfy the requirements of the legal components and so on, you can consider having frequent and continuous training. The old school methodology can be very time consuming because these are long, detailed presentations which talk about the technicals and the technologicals and the policies, the procedures, and so on. The new approach is to do it in a few minutes. Do it often, but do it in a few minutes. Again, the old school protects the company. Of course, we need to protect the assets as well, but the new approach says that you also need to address all of the third parties and advisors that are involved in the processes that we have. And especially now, due to the COVID situation, we have multiple advisors and consultants and third parties involved. In the old school, there is one presentation that probably is used every year. I remember when I was working for a large organization, we had the United States presentation on bribery, fraud, and corruption. And we went through the same presentation every year, and we signed off on the same presentation. The new approach is to avoid having a one-size-fits-all training and have a tailored, personalized, and individual training so that it gives some value to the people, to the participants. And so on. You can go through the list. The idea is to focus on awareness, to focus on compliance, to make sure that it's not boring, but you can also do that by having or simulating some real life threats based on the experience that have occurred. You can update it with customized recent cyber attacks that you have had it probably in your organization. Make sure or make a special attempt to focus on the behavior, the culture, make sure that they feel positive about the training, and then ensure that there is an interaction. There are some quizzes, there is a test, there is some certificate, and it is a little bit more fun to go through it. Now, as we all know, cybersecurity is complex. There are many things that we need to focus on. These are just a few examples as suggested by the World Economic Forum. We have a cyber war, and somehow we need to go from cyber war to cyber privacy. We have the technology and some of the laws that govern the technology. Unfortunately, we do not have any global law. We still do not have a global law on data protection. And as you probably are aware, a few weeks ago, United States came with a data protection suggestion that was endorsed by multiple companies. And a couple of days ago, China responded with a similar suggestion, law, mandate. Of course, none of these laws are global. The American suggestion was endorsed by the Western countries, and the Chinese suggestion is so new, it's only a couple of days ago. You can read it in the Wall Street Journal, or you can send us an email and we will send you that article. Or I have also written about it on my LinkedIn, so you can go there and get the link on the Wall Street Journal. So anyway, there is this war going on between United States and China, and now it involves even data protection, data privacy, IT, and cybersecurity issues seen from their own, perhaps selfish focus on what their needs and realizations are. But And this makes, of course, IT and cybersecurity on a global level much more complex, because we know that data knows no boundaries. We know that data transfers is a global phenomena, and we need to have some laws, some mandates that govern this. But this is right now. It's only GDPR that is the global gold standard, and I would think that GDPR, because it has a tradition which is more than 25 years old on data privacy and data protection, that it probably will be the norm. But anyway, we need to ensure on a solid cybersecurity foundation in the organization. At the same time, we need to ensure a robust IT security foundation in the organization. And you can only do that by making sure that you have the components of learning, training, awareness at regular levels based on the earlier slide that we had. And then, of course, we need to go on the details about risk management, the phishing attacks, the ransomware, and so on. All of the technicalities, and we will be talking about that in a short while, so that ultimately you can develop a holistic approach to your roadmap, your holistic approach with a roadmap and a framework. And we will also discuss that in a short while. And the combined components of the 6 items I talked about earlier will then be able to identify the critical issues that can assure how cybersecurity can address the issues that is on the corporate or the board of directors agenda. So that you go from your structural infrastructure protection to critical infrastructure protection by using the methodology that we talked about. So now we will go through 14 steps on how we can make sure that the training and awareness component is taken care of and also goes in all of the nooks and corners. First, you need to ensure the distinction, the definition. What is data security, what is IT security, and what is cybersecurity? Because we see very often in the organizations that these 3 areas are jumbled, are mixed together. And what one department thinks is data security, the other department thinks is cybersecurity. What one department thinks is cybersecurity, somebody else talks about IT security. So you need to make sure that you start with distinction so that everybody in the organization understands what we are talking about. And then annually identify 3 components on each of these major areas. We suggest that you can talk about encryption, you can talk about access control, or you can talk about tokenization. And as you probably are aware, tokenization is a process of substituting sensitive data elements with non-sensitive equivalents. It's a token so that you can kind of fool the perpetrator, the intruder, the enemy, the cyber criminal, and so on through tokenization. But so you can use some others, but we talk about encryption because encryption is something that you will always need, and the stronger the encryption, the better it is, and of course the more expensive it is either. Find 3 areas where you can focus on IT security. That could be backups, and you'll be surprised how many organizations think that they have a backup when they only overwrite what they have registered the day before or the month before or the week before. So the backup, what they think is a regular backup, is nothing else but overwriting the previous backup that you have, which is of course a big disaster when you really need the backup. Patches, Antivirus protection, these are the three components on IT security. And then cybersecurity, you need to have a response plan. What do you do when there is a breach, when there is an attack? What are the defense mechanisms, and how you make sure everybody is involved in the awareness? Now, these are 9 areas, and we have chosen these 9 areas because you'd be surprised that in each of these components, for example, access control, in a recent survey that was made, they found that about 80% of the breaches, 80% of the breaches were due to lack of passwords or lack of sophisticated passwords and patches that were not updated. And if a lot of the current cyber breaches are due to these two areas alone, access control and patches, you can see that awareness is not done in the manner it should be done, because it is more or less easy to install the patch when you get it from the system provider, because there has been some flaws in the system, and they provide you with a patch, but very often the patches are not updated. So there is many things you can do in order to ensure that the 3 components, the patches, the passwords, and the awareness could alone, these 3 components can take care of perhaps 80% of your breach reasons. Step 2, what are the cybersecurity challenges? The frauds. And here again, decide on 3 areas. And here again, we go back to the strong password policies, how you can have the passphrases and the password vault and so on to ensure that there is a strong password policy that is enforced in the organization. Limit use of phones and laptops. You must have a procedure on bring your own devices, how limiting the use of company assets, company IT assets by other people than the employee himself. Because remember, if another person uses the hardware, it's a breach. If you send a file to somebody who is not in your organization or not authorized to receive that file, it is also a breach. So there are various areas that you need to ensure so that you can limit the use of phones, laptop systems, and files. And then, of course, awareness, social engineering, identity theft, cybersecurity tricks are rampant in the organization. And then you need to have a framework. You decide on a cybersecurity framework. This is just one component we have taken from the NIST framework, the most recent update that was issued in January of this year. And here again, we have just taken a few components where you can focus on to start with, and then you can always increase based on the framework that you have selected. We do not recommend that you only use the NIST framework. There are multiple frameworks available. It also depends on what type of systems you have, what type of hardware you have, so that there is a correspondence to the selected framework and the systems that you have in the organization. But most of the functions, most of the effective core functions for cybersecurity are identical in almost all of the frameworks. The focus depends on the country where the framework originates from. NIST is from the United States, so they have a different focus than perhaps a European framework. But whatever you choose, take the fundaments of the framework that you select, and then categorize it customize it so that it fits the organization that you have. But these are the general areas that you need to ensure how you can protect and deter the cyber threats through access control, awareness training, data security, data present, their processes, your protective tools, and so on. Step 4, you need to go from data privacy to cyber privacy. And here you need to divide it into 3 areas. You have the strategic focus, you have the operational focus, and you have the tactical focus. And here is a checklist on what you can do in order to ensure that you go through all of these areas. And when you want to go from a data privacy component environment to a cyber privacy environment in connection with a data breach, you need to figure out what actually did happen during that breach. And you can do that by simulating it, or you can do it by having some scenario planning exercise, so that you can learn and you can identify and you can contain the breach. So this checklist talks about what actions were taken on the network by the cybersecurity criminals. How did they move around? How did they enter? And when were they detected? And what were the questions that need to be answered in connection with the detection? Because very often the attackers, the cyber criminals, remain in the network even before they are detected. And we say remain, that doesn't mean that it is done physically. It is all in the IT tool that they use to begin the attack. And that tool, that system, that bug, that worm, whatever it is, remains in the system until somebody actually, physically identifies the bug, the worm, whatever it is, and then burns it. So this is the checklist that you need to do so that you can go from a data privacy component to a cyber privacy component. And in order to do that, you need to go through a process cycle that takes care of your information security policies, identifies the security organization, you identify the assets, you identify the controls, you operationalize the processes, you monitor the processes, you take the corrective actions, and ultimately you have a management review so that you decide what actions need to be taken. So this is another framework. It is a little bit more technical, but it goes more into the details. Where we had the previous framework, the NIST framework we talked about in slide 6, that was more related to the organization, while this is more related to the technical components. And in our seminars, we go into a lot of details in these areas. Step 6, you need to have some kind of a detailed checklist, a controls checklist. And when it comes to information security, the only one that covers almost all of the areas you need in an organization, big or small, is the ISO 27001. So you use the ISO for your assurance. You make sure that it covers all of the data that you have in the organization and not just the personal data because of the GDPR or any other data privacy mandate that you have in your country, because now most countries have a data privacy, data protection mandate. If they don't have it, it is probably on the drawing board, and definitely within a couple of years, all countries in the world, I would say 95% of the countries in the world have a mandate. So based on that, you have your security and your controls framework. We talked about two frameworks earlier. We talk about the people, the processes, the technology, the accountability component. There has to be somebody who is responsible. There is somebody, a manager, an employee who has the ownership, who takes the stewardship, so that on every control, on every test, there is a owner, a process owner, a risk owner, a control owner, so that there is the accountability component. And as time goes by, almost all mandates require that accountability is something that all of the stakeholders are involved in. Everything is based on risk, and we want continuous improvement, and you also need to do audits and testing so that ultimately you can get some kind of a certification. So this is another ways of taking into consideration that all corners have been addressed so that nothing is left for itself. Step 7, culture. You can have all of the 6 components in the organization that is working, but if you do not have the corporate culture, then it is worthless. If you do not have a controls culture, if you do not have a monitoring culture, if you don't have a disciplinary culture, a lot of the issues will not function according to plan. And if you want to have a culture component, there are many ways of doing it. You can always start with identifying the values of your organization. Every organization, big or small, has some kind of a value component involved, and based on that you can start to develop the culture. And here are some of the statistics which are in a way quite alarming, which proves that employee negligence contributes to a lot of breaches. And of course, if it is due to employee negligence, then the technical installations, the technical systems will not help much. Learn from experiences and practices so that you can develop on the culture that you have established. So that any data privacy culture, the reasons why you have the data privacy culture, you can decide on how you are going to address it. It can be lack of support from the board level, lack of support from management level. The accountability component that we talked about earlier is not taken care of. Low budget, resources, skills are not available in the organization. Lack of training, weak documentation, a very, very big component, because oftentimes the documentation that there is in the organization is much too old, in systems that sometimes do not even exist in the organization, but still it is considered to be the documentation for a particular process or a particular framework, which is of course terrible. So learn from the experience, and here is the checklist for that. Conduct workshops so that you can discuss these issues, how you can make privacy relevant for CXOs down to other employees. How do you tailor the privacy training and awareness, either based on departments or based on projects or based on systems or based on upgrades or based on any new platform, IT platform that you probably are going to install, and so on. How do you collect, analyze, process, use misuse the data that you have. All of that is governed in the training and awareness. And again, the principle of accountability, so that we know that there is one person, one manager, one stakeholder, one employee who is involved. Step 10, put it all in a framework, put it all in a template. And here is a suggestion that what you can use in order to collect all of the 9 previous steps that we have had in a plan. And you can call it an IT governance plan, or you can call it something else, but just make sure that you have some of the areas that we have talked about: create risk awareness, implement controls, enhance controls, demonstrate compliance, and how or who are the stakeholders, what are the resources, who is going to be responsible, and what are the missions and goals. These are just some suggestions. You can find your own. However, it is important that whatever you have identified in the previous 9 steps, you put it in a template so that you can develop it and use it as time goes by. When you have come so far, you can then have a end-to-end cybersecurity framework. We started with a elementary standard framework. We went through all of the steps that we had there, and then now is the time that you can develop your own framework based on the findings that you got from the previous 10 steps. So if you have come so far, you will have a cybersecurity governance framework which is customized. It contains the whole set of the management tools. It has a comprehensive risk management approach. It talks about the cybersecurity, the awareness programs, and it takes care of the crucial roles that are required to shape your complete cybersecurity framework, customized framework. So that you have an organizational structure, you have the cultural structure, you have an awareness program, and together it is your cybersecurity governance frameworks. And here is a checklist that you can go through step by step so that you are sure that your cybersecurity plays an important role in achieving the objectives that are customized to the current needs that you have in the organization. You have taken care of the technical controls, the audits, the assessment, the awareness, so that whatever attitude, change of attitude that is required, change of behavior that is required, will address the future challenges in the organization. And that brings us then to the second last step. Oh, I said it was 14, now it's only 13, sorry. So that you can talk about the situation awareness. You can talk about the weak links that you have in the organization, because it is the weakest link that will decide how this complete plan that we went through today is going to work. The weak link can be in the boardroom, or it can be in the back office, or anywhere in between. But you need to know where is the weak link in the organization, so that you can use this procedure to leverage risk, but also drive innovation, also drive growth that is so important in the organization. Because what we want to develop is a holistic cyber strategy, so that you can innovate, you can transform, you can differentiate, because the the transformation, the data transformation, the digitization, and all of these components will be there. And it's coming in the next couple of weeks, at least in Denmark, where only yesterday or the day before yesterday, one of the major companies introduced 5G. And with the introduction of 5G, everything is going to be faster. The minimum fastest speed is 40 times, and some say it is going to be up to 100 times. But everything will be in real time. Big data is going to be very, very big, and so on. So you need to have all of these steps that we talked about so that you are aware of the situation, so that you can somehow automatically and in real time address the threats, display the tracks, figure out the source of attacks, and enable a comprehensive visualized risk management and alert program so that you're aware of what is going on. So after being aware of the situation, you can then talk about the solutions. What are the solutions that you have with regards to your security assessment? What are the solutions you have with regards to your security applications? And what solutions you have regarding to the security awareness that we discussed in the slides earlier. So this is a structured approach, a structured program for how you can introduce training and awareness in your organization so that it covers all of the components that you have. So just the whole presentation that I have is taken from the multiple presentations that we have, and I just want to take 1 minute of your time to make a advertisement for our cybersecurity, IT and cybersecurity courses. And as you are aware, we have it in 5 different levels. The first level is the foundation, and this is what we have gone through is just about 5, 6, 7% of that complete foundation training. And the next level we have is the officer, where we reimagine, where we re-engineer the different components that we talked about. The next is the practitioner, where we reposition all of the areas that we talked about after the re-engineering work has been done. The next level is the professional. The 4th level is the professional level, where we reinvent depending on the requirements that there is. Where we reinvent depending on the type of function that you have in the organization, whether it's the DPO, whether it's the CISO, whether it's the CTO, whether it's the CIO, whether it's the board of directors, whether it's the CFO, and so on. And then finally, the reset function, which is at the director level, so that the director has the necessary qualifications after he has gone through the 5 levels of the training that we offer. So this was my presentation, and keep your questions coming. We will go through. I don't know, no?